He was just another old man in a faded bomber jacket. At least that's what the TSA agent muttered when he scoffed at the dented metal case in his hands. Souvenirs don't count as carry-ons, the agent smirked, tossing the small box into a gray plastic bin like it held nothing but rusty junk. The case clattered, flipped, and burst open. Metal spilled out across the conveyor, built like forgotten coins at a yard sale. Nobody moved. Nobody cared. Until 10 minutes later, the terminal fell into silence, and uniform boots hit the polished tile like thunder in a church. That old man, the one they all ignored, had once carried nations on his back. And they'd thrown his legacy in a bin. If you believe that honor isn't something that expires at the gate, like and subscribe, because this isn't just a story, it's a reckoning. The man's name was Henry Dalton, Master Gunnery Sergeant, retired. 82 years old, wiry proud, he walked with a limp no cane could ever fix and wore his years not like a burden, but like a uniform no one had asked him to remove. He moved slowly but deliberately, eyes sharp beneath the brim of a worn olive cap embroidered with a patch that most people didn't even recognize anymore. Force Recon, 2nd Marine Division. Terminal C at Southgate International buzzed with its usual chaos. Wheels dragged, babies cried, phones chimed. And in the middle of all of it, Henry waited patiently in the TSA line with nothing but a worn duffel, a manila folder with his boarding pass, and that box, the metal one with velvet inside that still smelled like gun oil and desert sand. He was heading to a memorial ceremony in D.C., one final invitation to speak on behalf of his unit. For once, they wanted to hear from the ones who were still alive. But before Henry ever saw his gate, before he even crossed through the scanner, he was stopped by a bored, barely legal agent with mirrored sunglasses and a name badge that read Trent. Trent grunted when Henry handed him the case. "What's this?" "Military awards," Henry replied. "Personal effects. I'm taking them to Arlington." "Can't do that," Trent muttered, already flipping it open. Inside was a bronze star, a purple heart, and 2 silver campaign medals from Vietnam and Desert Shield, each nestled in velvet, tarnished with time but unmistakably earned. Trent turned the case upside down. The medals slid into a bin with a metallic clink, as though they were spare change. One of them, his unit's crest, custom-made in Saigon, rolled onto the floor and stopped at the feet of a woman with a stroller. Henry bent down, knees stiff, and picked it up with a grunt. "Hey, buddy," Trent said loudly enough for a few people nearby to hear. "Next time, just ship your antiques ahead. This ain't a museum." Laughter bubbled behind the screening desk. One of Trent's colleagues chuckled, nudging him with an elbow. "Probably bought 'em on eBay." Henry said nothing, just slipped the metal back into its slot and closed the lid carefully. "You done?" he asked. "You can go," Trent replied, waving him on without a second glance. A few people saw. A few looked away. But one person didn't. Her name was Lana Rivera, a senior flight attendant on United Route 1875. She'd seen Henry arrive, saw the precision in his step, the calmness in his posture, the way he scanned every corner of the terminal out of habit, not paranoia. She was standing in the priority line, checking in pilots, when she saw what happened at the scanner. She didn't say anything then, but she made a call, and on the other end of that call wasn't a supervisor or a public relations desk. It was someone who answered on the second ring and only said, "Understood." "What gate?" Henry sat near gate 12, alone in a row of metal seats no one ever wanted unless they had no other option. His box was now taped shut with TSA inspection stickers, and he held it gently on his lap like a sacred object. Outside the window, a plane was taxiing. Overhead, the boarding announcement for a different flight echoed like static. No one paid him attention, just an old man with a box. The kind the world had already decided didn't matter anymore. He didn't want applause. He didn't want special treatment. He just wanted to get to Arlington. But respect, it seemed, had to be earned again, even by those who'd already given everything. Trent, meanwhile, was still at the screening area, joking with another agent about confiscating a woman's perfume. He didn't see the message that pinged on the internal DHS terminal. He didn't hear the sudden clicks of polished boots on marble. And he definitely didn't notice when 4 black SUVs rolled through the tarmac access gate, bypassing security with authority no badge could override. But everyone else did. And they all turned when she walked in. Secretary of Defense Margaret Halston. No entourage, just gravity. Her eyes scanned the terminal once, locking immediately on the man at gate 12. 10 minutes had passed, and the reckoning had arrived. The moment Secretary of Defense Margaret Halston stepped through the sliding glass doors of Terminal C, the air inside the building changed, just a subtle shift at first, the kind that prickles skin before thunder hits. She wasn't flanked by security details or TV cameras. She didn't come for a press conference or a scheduled appearance. She came because someone made a call about a man who deserved better than a smirk and a sticker on his legacy. Dressed in regulation civilian black, her shoes tapped with purpose as she crossed the concourse, eyes locked on gate 12, and suddenly the hum of conversations, the soft jazz overhead, and the rolling announcements faded behind the weight of her presence. No one had to be told who she was. Those who didn't recognize her instinctively stood straighter anyway, unsure why. Passengers paused mid-step, parents pulled children closer, and airline staff turned away from check-in monitors just long enough to see Power walking quietly through the middle of their morning. At the security checkpoint, TSA agent Trent glanced up, his expression confused at the sudden hush that had settled like snowfall over the terminal. He craned his neck, saw a woman in black surrounded by 3 officers in crisp military dress, and smirked. Someone must have missed their flight, he muttered, just as his supervisor's voice cracked through the earpiece in his collar. All agents, be advised, high-level DoD personnel entering Terminal C, full cooperation. Do not engage without authorization. Trent's jaw tightened. His partner gave a slow, deliberate side glance that said, whatever's coming, it's not for us, or so he thought. Meanwhile, at gate 12, Henry Dalton hadn't moved. His back remained straight despite the stiffness in his spine, and the metal box still sat in his lap like something too fragile for hands to touch. He didn't notice the silence, didn't see the people parting, but he did hear the sound of regulation dress shoes approaching, deliberate, precise, familiar. When the secretary stopped in front of him, the noise of the terminal fell completely away, like the power had been shut off, like time itself paused to let dignity take the floor. Halston didn't speak at first. She simply removed her hat and offered a crisp, deliberate salute. Not the casual kind reserved for public photo ops. This was the kind rendered for warriors. The kind she hadn't used in years except at funerals. Henry slowly rose, steadying himself on the armrest, his free hand lifting in response, not out of reflex, but out of respect. Master Gunnery Sergeant Dalton, she said clearly, her voice like gravel wrapped in velvet, you have been disrespected by this institution. That ends now. Behind her, her aides opened a black case, sleek, polished, government issue. Inside was a replacement box, lined in dark velvet, with Henry's name etched into a brass plate, and engraved beneath, for valor carried quietly. She took the old TSA sealed box from his hands, opened it carefully, and with her own gloved hands, transferred each medal into the new display. Every motion was reverent. The Bronze Star, the Purple Heart, the Desert Storm Campaign crest. Then the last one, his unit's Saigon-forged emblem. Halston held it a moment longer, her thumb brushing across the edge. My father wore this same one, she murmured. He always said men like you built our country brick by brick and paid in silence. Henry didn't answer. He didn't have to. His eyes said enough. He stood still as the secretary turned, box in hand, and addressed the terminal, not through a microphone, but with the kind of voice that made people listen even if they didn't mean to. 10 minutes ago, she began. A man who served this country with distinction was humiliated at this airport. Not by a mob, not by a protest, but by a uniformed federal employee who forgot that respect is non-optional. The crowd grew stiller. Cell phones started recording. Passengers paused boarding to listen. Across the room, Trent stood frozen. Halston's gaze scanned the room slowly. This is not just about one man's medals. It's about the idea that service ends when the war does. That men and women who carried our burdens somehow become invisible when they put on civilian clothes. Her voice dropped lower, heavier. Let this terminal remember something today. Medals don't shine because they're polished. They shine because of blood, because of grit, because someone earned them inch by inch. She stepped aside as a Marine officer approached Henry and offered his arm. The secretary placed the new box in Henry's hands, then whispered, "Would you walk with me?" Together, they turned, Henry on the Marine's arm, his cap pulled a little lower, his medals safe in something worthy of them, and the crowd opened around them like water parting around a ship. No one moved to stop them. No one dared. Officers saluted. Passengers stepped back in silence. And behind them, Secretary Halston paused just once at the security checkpoint. Her eyes found Trent, still frozen, pale, staring, and she said, not loudly, but just loud enough, "You don't touch what you haven't earned." Then she walked on. A reckoning had come, and the air was thick with it. Not violence, not outrage, but truth, the kind that lingers even after the footsteps fade. The kind that rewrites what people remember. Because that day at Terminal C, respect didn't arrive through protocol or permission. It arrived with purpose. And from that moment forward, no one looked at Henry Dalton the same again. Henry Dalton didn't ask for applause as he walked through Terminal C, but he got it anyway. One hesitant clap starting somewhere behind the gate desk, then two, then more, until it rolled through the concourse like a storm of realization, each hand striking not out of pity, but out of awakening. The old man they'd ignored, the one with the quiet posture and the taped-shut box, now moved through the crowd escorted by the Secretary of Defense herself and a Marine major at his side, medals gleaming from a case that bore his name in brass, not barcode. The silence had cracked wide open, and what filled it wasn't noise, it was reverence. People stood. Airline staff, maintenance workers, even jet bridge operators put their hands over their hearts. A little boy broke free from his mother and ran up just close enough to ask, "Were you a hero?" Henry, ever measured, ever modest, simply knelt down slowly, bones creaking, breath tight, and said, "I served." Then he stood, because heroes don't need to explain. By the time he reached the aircraft steps, the pilot had exited the cabin to shake his hand, eyes glassy, mouth firm. "We'll hold the plane," he whispered. "Take all the time you need." Henry nodded once and boarded slowly. But outside, the story wasn't finished. The Secretary of Defense turned to the crowd and raised one hand. Not for silence, but for memory. "This country has always been divided by how it treats its past," she said. "Some bury it, some brand it, but a few, men like this, carry it." Her voice never rose. It didn't have to. He carried fallen brothers, untold missions, and years of silence that most of us couldn't survive, let alone live with grace. And when his name faded from rosters, when his rank was reduced to whispers, he still showed up, because service isn't what you did. It's what you carry forward. The TSA supervisor arrived mid-speech, breathless and pale, whispering apologies that came too late. Trent, the agent who had tossed the medals, stood behind the crowd, no longer smirking. His eyes were locked on the man he'd mocked, now being honored by the very institution Trent served without understanding. The secretary turned briefly and addressed them, not cruelly, but clearly. "You don't get to judge what you've never had the strength to be." She didn't need to say names. Everyone knew. Hours later, the story broke online. A veteran disrespected, honored, and reclaimed in the space of one terminal's heartbeat. Videos flooded in from passengers, journalists, and even a Delta Gate agent who uploaded it with the caption, "He didn't need a parade. Just one person to see him." By nightfall, #Henry Dalton trended nationwide. Comment sections filled with phrases like, "My grandfather served with him. My dad wore that same emblem. I saw this man at my VA once. He held the door for 10 people." But Henry himself? He didn't read any of it. He arrived in Washington the next day, saluted his brothers at Arlington, delivered a quiet, perfect speech that ended with just 5 words, "I was proud to serve." And when he walked off that podium, he handed the case to a young corporal who'd never seen real combat, but trained every day like someone had. "Keep this safe," Henry said. "You'll need it more than me." Back at Southgate Airport, a small brass plaque now hangs beside the TSA checkpoint. No press release, no fanfare, just 4 lines engraved in silence. Master Gunnery Sergeant Henry Dalton, Bronze Star Purple Heart Vietnam, Desert Shield. Disrespected here, then rightfully honored. Let this never happen again. And if you ask anyone who was there that day, anyone who saw that quiet man pick up the medal from the floor and hold it with both hands like a memory too sacred to speak, they'll tell you it wasn't about justice. It was about recognition. Because you can lose titles, you can lose youth, but you never lose the right to be seen. And on that day, Henry Dalton was finally seen, not as a burden, not as a relic, but as what he always was, a soldier, a leader, a legacy in motion. And he was alive to watch it happen.